He knew something was wrong with his brain. Charles Whitman, 25 years old, wrote a note the night before he killed 16 people. I do not really understand myself these days. I am a victim of many unusual and irrational thoughts. Then he made a request. After I am dead, cut open my skull, find out what is wrong with me. And they did. They found a tumor pressing against his amygdala, the part of your brain that stops you from killing, which raises a question we don't want to answer. Was he a monster or just a man with broken hardware? I'm Lumi, and what neuroscience reveals about violent criminals is disturbing. Not because it excuses them, but because it suggests evil might not be a choice at all. To understand this, we need to start with how your brain makes decisions. Benjamin Libet runs an experiment. Simple task: flex your wrist whenever you want. But he's measuring something specific. When does the decision actually happen? He finds that brain activity starts 300 to 500 milliseconds before people consciously decide to move. Your brain commits, then you become aware of the decision. John Dylan Haynes uses modern brain scanners. He can predict which button you will press 10 seconds before you consciously choose. Your brain decides, then waits, then tells you about it. Every choice you make, your brain knew first. Consciousness just watches and takes credit. Now, if that is true for normal brains making harmless decisions, what about damaged brains making deadly ones? August 1st, 1966, University of Texas. Charles Whitman climbs a tower with a rifle. Over 96 minutes, he kills 16 people, wounds 31 others. Police finally kill him. But the night before, he had written multiple notes. He didn't understand himself anymore. He felt controlled by thoughts he couldn't stop. He suspected brain damage. He requested an autopsy. They found a glioblastoma, tumor that size of a pecan, pressing directly against his amygdala. Your amygdala manages fear, aggression, and impulse control. Damage it and the brakes on your violent impulses stop working. Whitman essentially had a biological gun pressed against the part of his brain that prevents killing. He felt it happening. He asked them to look for it, and they found exactly what he feared. Did Charles Whitman choose to kill those people, or did a tumor choose for him? But this isn't one case. It is a pattern. Phineas Gage, a railroad worker. An iron rod shoots through his skull, destroying his frontal lobe. He survives, but the polite, responsible man becomes aggressive, impulsive, and unable to control himself. Same person, different brain, completely different behavior. Modern studies show the same thing. Brain scans of violent criminals consistently reveal structural differences. Reduced prefrontal cortex activity, that is, impulse control. Amygdala abnormalities, emotional regulation. Differences in regions that process empathy and consequences. Traumatic brain injury is found in 60% of prison inmates. Normal person had trauma, suddenly violent. Nobody chooses their brain structure. Nobody chooses if a tumor grows. Nobody chooses if an accident damages their frontal lobe. So if biology determines violent behavior, where is the evil? But here is where it gets complicated. Not everyone with brain damage becomes violent. Thousands of people have traumatic brain injuries and never hurt anyone. Many people with reduced prefrontal cortex activity live normal lives. Even identical twins, same genetics, similar brain structure, only have about 50% overlap in criminal behavior. Same brain, different outcomes. Two brothers, same house, same abusive father, same poverty, one becomes violent, one doesn't. Why? Two people with frontal lobe damage, one commits assault, one becomes a successful business person. Why? The answer, it is not just biology. Environment matters, trauma matters, random timing matters. Biology load the gun, environment pull the triggers. But sometimes the gun doesn't fire. Sometimes it fires without an obvious trigger, which makes legal responsibility messy. Because if it is not purely biological and not purely environmental, what percentage of someone's actions are actually theirs? We don't know, but we are starting to be able to see it in brain scans. Brain imaging is now used in courtrooms, not to excuse behavior, but to explain it. Defense attorneys show brain damage to argue for reduced sentences. They are not saying he's innocent, they are saying his biology failed him in ways he couldn't control. But our justice system isn't designed for this complexity. We have two options: guilty or not guilty, responsible or insane. The law assumes you either choose your actions or you didn't. But neuroscience suggests most criminals exist in a gray area. They didn't choose in the way we imagine choice working, but they weren't completely controlled either. Their damaged biology interacted with their environment in ways that produced violence. For centuries, religion taught us that evil is a choice. Sin requires free will. Our entire justice system is built on that foundation. The idea that we have souls capable of genuine moral choice that transcends biology. But if a brain scan can show exactly why someone became violent, if removing a tumor can completely reverse their behavior, that foundation starts to crack. The soul, if it exists, seems bound by the hardware it is running on. So we are left with uncomfortable questions. Do we treat them or punish them? Do we prevent them from existing in society even if it wasn't truly their fault? And think about how many people right now have dangerous brain structures but haven't just encountered the trigger yet. Are they taking time bombs? Or just people with biological vulnerabilities that might never activate? We can now see the risk in a brain scan. We just don't know what to do about it. Here's what might be the most important part. Brains can change. Neuroplasticity means damaged brains aren't necessarily permanent. Therapy can strengthen prefrontal cortex activity. Meditation can change amygdala response pattern. Treatment for trauma can reduce aggression, remove tumors, reverse behavior. And brainwashed people can be deprogrammed. It is difficult, takes time, but consciousness can be restored. Understanding the biology and psychology of violence doesn't mean excusing it. It means potentially preventing it. If we can identify brain-based risk factors early through imaging, behavioral patterns, family history, we could intervene before violence happens. Not by locking people up for having wrong brains, but by providing treatment, therapy, environmental support. The goal isn't to let violent criminals go free. It is to understand why violence happens so we can reduce it. Whether someone chose their actions in some philosophical sense doesn't change that they are dangerous. But understanding why they're dangerous might help us create fewer of them. Prevention over punishment, treatment over revenge, understanding over condemnation, not because it is morally superior, because it might actually work. So are violent criminals born evil or made evil? Both and neither. They are born with biological risk factors they didn't choose, shaped by environments they didn't choose. Sometimes their brain makes decisions before consciousness arrives. Sometimes their psychology is hijacked without them knowing. And we call all of that choice and build our entire justice system around it. Most of us are luckier than we realize. Not morally better, just neurologically luckier. We were born with brains that function normally. We avoided the injuries and tumors. We weren't targeted by sophisticated psychological manipulation. We had environments that didn't activate whatever vulnerabilities we carry. That doesn't mean violent criminals aren't responsible, but it means responsibility is more complicated than we thought. Maybe the question isn't, are they evil? But what do we do with people whose biology or psychology failed them in ways that they couldn't control? I don't have the answer. But I know just locking them up and calling them monsters isn't working. Understanding might be the first step towards actually solving it. I'm Lomi, and thanks for thinking about this.